Welcome to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordero, and this is where we get real about life with celiac disease. I'll share honest conversations about the emotional side of living with an autoimmune condition. Think of this as your mix of support, relatability, and inspiration to help you not just survive, but thrive with celiac. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, I'm not a medical professional. Everything I share is based on my own experience living with celiac disease. This podcast is not medical advice, so please always consult your doctor about your own health. Hi, welcome back to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordero, and we are here with Jon Sherman, the co-founder of Matter, a brand new 100% gluten-free restaurant in New York City that I'm personally obsessed with. I've talked about it before on the podcast, so I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Lucia.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into all about your wellness journey, why you started Matter. But first up, we have some little segments on the pod. So first up, we have Gluten-Free Fave of the Week. So what's a gluten-free product or meal that you've been loving, maybe at Matter or elsewhere?
Yeah, so look, our entire restaurant is gluten-free, so I could literally name anything. But I would say something that's probably pretty unique to us is we serve a really lean grass-fed meatball that is delicious. And I happen to know, as somebody who lives a celiac-friendly lifestyle, finding gluten-free meatballs is tough. Usually they're made with some sort of flour or breadcrumbs. So most of the meatballs out there are not gluten-free. So to be able to get a really high-quality, delicious, and gluten-free meatball, I think is pretty exciting. So I know it's one of the more popular dishes at the restaurant, and we have a kind of a broader dish built around it with a number of different vegetables, but you can also put it with any of the vegetables or any of the sides on our menu that you want.
Okay, yeah, I love that. And it is hard to find gluten-free meatballs, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize that because you think, oh, it's just like meat. But a lot of times there's extra flour inside, so that's good for people that are gluten-free or celiac to be aware of, is that you do have to check even meatballs.
The traditional meatball has breadcrumbs in it, and most restaurants are just putting regular wheat flour or breadcrumbs.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, yummy. I need to try that. I don't think I had the meatballs whenever I was there. Okay, so moving on to news of the week. Very fitting news. The first fast casual restaurant that lets diners track nutrition in real time opens in New York. So you guys guessed it, that is Matter. And a little lowdown from the article says that Matter allows customers to build plates and see calorie and macronutrient updates instantly as they adjust portion sizes, giving diners the flexibility to order exactly what they want. And the price also changes in real time too as you adjust
exactly.
the amounts.
We recognize that a lot of people out there are value conscious, and so we have kind of a pricing model where you just get exactly what you pay for. So if you want more of a certain ingredient, then, we'll charge you for that. But if you don't want, or if you want less of something, then we'll charge you less.
Yeah, I think that's
kind of
amazing.
Very transparent pricing model. In addition, obviously, we're extreme transparency just around all the ingredients we use.
Right, which is so revolutionary, I think, because a lot of times you go to a restaurant and you ask what's in something, and the people working there don't even know sometimes, which can be frustrating for someone with a dietary restriction and celiac. So it gives you such peace of mind to know exactly what's in there.
Yeah, I mean, at the core of it, I believe it's really hard to achieve, your health goals, especially with kind of your nutritional intake and diet approach when you're eating out at restaurants. You don't know what ingredients they're using. You don't know kind of the portions of what you're getting. You obviously generally don't know the nutritional content of what you're eating. So it's just, if you want to take any sort of measured approach to kind of thinking about what you're putting into your body, it's very hard to do that outside of, spending hours and hours every week, downloading recipes, meal prepping, weighing every portion, logging and tracking. So, at the core of it, that's really the solution that we're trying to bring, which is that measured approach where you can really dial in exactly what you're putting into your body, have, the kind of confidence and trust that you're putting the highest quality ingredients into your body, and, just not having to do all of the work and all of the brain damage around kind of doing every single thing yourself.
Totally. Well, okay, so I think it's very common for professionals in New York to want to just like order out all of their meals, which I'm very guilty of. And I was kind of like having this epiphany about it because one of my pet peeves is like, okay, you ask for extra protein or like low whatever, but it's kind of a gamble if you're ordering from like a typical fast casual restaurant on like who's working that day and what they think like an extra serving is versus like what a normal serving is. So like you can't really control exactly how much food you're getting. So I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, maybe I should just cook from home because like that's the only way to really control what you're eating. But this is like, yeah, as you said, a solution to that problem.
Yeah,
which is so cool.
Look, certainly protein and even to a lesser extent macros are becoming more kind of top of mind. There's a certain Mexican fast casual restaurant that's running a huge advertising chain around the protein in their different dishes and, the kind of extra chicken, double chicken protein.
Yeah.
But the reality is, having been a customer at those places many times, you're really at like the whim of whoever's serving you.
Exactly.
They're kind of just eyeballing it, and depending on the mood they're in, or depending on how maybe that location is being
managed.
Generous
or not.
Yeah. So the marketing might tell you, it's like this many grams of protein, but the reality is you don't really know.
Exactly. Yeah. So I want to get back to like the beginning of everything because I like did some research on LinkedIn. I know you used to like operate like a fried chicken joint, and then you kind of switched over to obviously now Matter, which is kind of focused on food in a totally different way. So what was your journey and like what made you start your health and wellness journey?
Yeah, so a couple stops along the way. I started a fried chicken chain in New York in 2012 when I was in my mid-20s. So like at that point in my life, I was interested in food already in a big way, but I was kind of the ideal customer profile of that business, somebody who was looking for something delicious, after a night of drinking. That was kind of the mid-20s lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And a couple years after I opened that restaurant, I met my now wife, who is celiac. And of course, she married somebody who operated a restaurant that served primarily gluten.
Yeah.
And so, she was pretty limited on our menu. I remember... we did serve grilled chicken, but the grill that we'd grill them on would be cross-contaminated, and they just, we weren't really trained to manage against, celiac or gluten-free in general because of the nature of the restaurant. And so if, I wanted to serve her food from my restaurant, I would literally have to go into the kitchen, clean the grill myself, and then, make her grilled chicken, which I did a decent amount.
Okay, that's nice.
And then, some point, probably around like 2018, 2019, just kind of started to really get into kind of my own awareness around what I was putting into my body. I think, of course, running a fried chicken restaurant, I was eating a lot of that and French fries. And, it's certainly, while the food was delicious, it's really, not the best thing, especially to be eating, frequently. So as I started to really pay attention to kind of what I was putting into my own body, I really just kind of started to go down the rabbit hole on a number of different ways. Ingredients, macronutrients, fitness, sleep, kind of it all ties together really. And just as I started to really focus on what I was putting into my own body, I realized I started to, have more energy, would feel better, like kind of all the great kind of cascading health effects. And, definitely put me at odds a little bit with the business that I was running because, of course, we were serving fried chicken and, wasn't the thing that I was kind of passionate about anymore, especially as, kind of going back to being the ideal customer profile of that business. When we started it, I was no longer that person. And so, as, I started to think about what to do next, kind of take this restaurant experience and growing a restaurant brand and also kind of mixing it with, a kind of more recent passion for nutrition and overall kind of health and wellness. And so, that was really the genesis for thinking about what Matter could become.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I feel like that makes so much sense. I mean, it's so normal for your like health and wellness journey to change as you get older. And like, I think that's so cool that you decided, oh, okay, like, yeah, fried chicken isn't what I'm passionate about anymore, but I still like love like the restaurant business and the food business and can do something else to make an impact. So I think that's such an awesome story. I'm curious, when you met your wife, she already had celiac disease?
She already had it, yes.
Okay. And had you heard of it before?
Loosely. I mean, I was aware of it because, I was already operating a restaurant, but, it was pretty much kind of black and white. If somebody had celiac, just tell them not to eat here. That was kind of the extent of it. But, she had been diagnosed in her like late 20s. Okay. So it was when we met, it was a relatively recent thing for her.
Okay.
So she grew up, eating gluten, most of her life until then. And, it was really kind of a journey together of, I kind of knew what I was signing up for, that, I would be kind of advocating for her not to get sick for, the rest of our lives.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like every couple where one has celiac and one doesn't kind of does things differently. I know Matter is 100% gluten-free. Was that kind of your wife having celiac, was that a personal reason behind that, or did you want Matter to be gluten-free for other reasons?
Well, I would say certainly, personal for sure, but beyond that, just having been forced to navigate the whole gluten-free world for her over a number of years. First off, I really started to see how common it was. I mean, I'd say of all the kind of allergy issues, gluten seemed to be, one of the most common ones, whether it was celiac. There's also a lot of people out there just with gluten allergies or gluten intolerances. So, kind of understanding how big of a need there was and how big of a kind of customer base there was around people seeking gluten-free options, certainly was highlighted to me being part of the journey with her. And then, I'd say beyond that, the reality is that, when you're married to somebody who's celiac, you don't eat a lot of gluten.
Right. I was going to ask that.
We go to restaurants. I like to share food, so
Yeah.
we're mostly, when we do go out, we're mostly eating gluten-free. In our home, if I'm buying ingredients for our house, we're mostly only bringing in gluten-free items. So, while I do, I love pizza, there's plenty of gluten things that are delicious. I really, don't eat them very frequently. And, one of the things that I've come to learn is that even though I'm not celiac or don't have any of these gluten intolerances, when I eat a lot of gluten, I don't feel great, it certainly, is clear that gluten, even for those without an allergy or an autoimmune disease, it's not the best for humans, I would say, in general, to digest and process. Again, if I eat a lot of gluten, while it might be delicious, I kind of know what I'm getting into, and I pretty much always will feel just a little bit sluggish or bloated afterwards. And I just in general, I think all things being equal, I generally take the gluten-free diet approach for myself as well. And I think we see that in a lot of people who, again, are looking to clean up their diet or just whatever, use nutrition as a way to kind of improve their health. And, so, it really seems like one of the most common recommendations is just remove gluten from your diet.
Totally. And as someone that knows a lot about different ingredients in foods, do you think that that's because of gluten itself, or more just what other ingredients tend to be in American gluten-free products?
Yeah, I think it's
gluten products.
Yeah, it's both. It's definitely both.
Yeah.
I think that sure, gluten itself can be hard to digest, especially probably in high volumes. But the types of, first off, gluten is just, the protein found in wheat flour. And, having been in the restaurant industry and understanding kind of the wide range of ingredients that are available, there's a lot of highly processed wheat flour being used, everywhere, in CPG products, in bakeries, in restaurants.
Yeah.
When I would go look at my ordering guide from, various food distributors, there's a pretty wide range of flours you can buy. And, generally the restaurant business is tough. People have small, tight margins. And so if they can find the cheaper ingredient, they generally will. And that, flour is certainly an area where, you can get a really highly processed flour that is relatively cheap. And I think a lot of restaurants are going to do that. A lot of packaged goods are going to do that.
Right, totally.
And, I think beyond that, there's also a lot of enriched flour that's being used in a number of places, which I think can be a double-edged sword. The government is essentially trying to get certain nutrients to the population, and they put them in wheat flour. But some of those things, include folic acid, which I know I actually have this gene mutation, the MTHFR gene mutation that doesn't allow my body to convert folic acid to folate, which is the thing that your body actually needs. So, I'm looking at even when I'm buying gluten, wheat products for like my kids or, for myself. I'm trying to avoid the enriched wheat flour for that reason. And with all the gluten-free products, it's just, you don't have to worry about that because they're not doing that. And so in general,
interesting. Yeah.
In general, as somebody who kind of maniacally reads food labels, mostly for my wife, it's safe to say that the gluten-free products just generally have cleaner labels and cleaner ingredients in them. That's not to say that always the case, but I'd say by and large, the gluten-free products, they're just using less, whether it's processed ingredients or all these other kind of chemicals, generally cleaner.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. So did you pretty much start reading ingredient labels when your wife had celiac and
anything you buy, you have to read the allergen warning, but really have to read every single ingredient because sometimes it can be hidden as well. So, I basically became PhD level at reading packaged good ingredient labels and also grilling waiters at restaurants to understand, not just the ingredients that are in a dish, but also, how the kitchen manages those allergies and, do they have the understanding of cross-contamination? Because, for her, she could get something that's gluten-free, but even if, somebody in the kitchen uses the same utensil or the same glove, even just that little bit of cross-contamination will make her a little sick.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you've had the same experience.
No, definitely. That's so interesting, though, because I think a lot of my friends that don't have celiac disease, people in general that maybe don't have a dietary need or a health issue, have a habit of just not reading the ingredient labels at all. But when you have celiac, obviously you have to, so you get in that habit. And I think having celiac and having to read the ingredient labels because of that kind of opened my eyes to other ingredients beyond just looking for gluten-free in terms of what other things am I putting into my body, even if it's gluten-free. So I feel it's interesting because I think there is a bigger shift with younger people starting to be more aware of the ingredients and what they're eating. But I still think it's super common for people to just not look at the ingredients list at all.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, first off, labels are designed for you not to read all of the ingredients.
You have to turn it over, squint.
They're in fine print. Yeah. They're not easy to read, and frankly, a lot of items just have a long list of ingredients, and some of them you don't even know what they are, and so it's hard to really discern, what's good or what's bad.
Exactly.
But definitely, that was a big part of, I'd say, my journey, having to really scrutinize every label. Yeah, to your point, yes, I'm looking for gluten, but now I'm looking at everything that's in there, and it's pretty eye-opening. Some of the, and even simple products that you would think wouldn't need a ton of ingredients. Some of the things that are being used kind of in particularly packaged goods, but really common, and it's well. I don't really know what this thing is, what this ingredient is, but do I want it in my body? Rather not.
Exactly, yeah. And I know at Matter, y'all are very focused on limiting processed ingredients. So what does that look like for you as you're, creating the menu? What are you looking for? Because when I think of processed foods, I think of just, something packaged or a protein bar, a David bar or something. I don't think of flour. I mean, I guess you don't have wheat flour at Matter as an example, but I don't think of it being in an ingredient like that you would think of as a whole food.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are really focused on serving whole foods and real foods. But that being said, you have to really scrutinize every ingredient we bring in because, again, whether it's the ingredient itself, the packaging that it's in, so we're cooking pretty much everything in extra virgin olive oil. That's another thing that I personally am very, very interested in and, seek out really high quality for myself. And so kind of applied that to the restaurant. And
I was curious about that because I saw that on the website. What is the reasoning behind that exactly for listeners that might not know?
So, first off, a lot of olive oil is marketed as olive oil, but is really, for cost reasons, a blend of olive oil and some other oils, usually seed oils, we'll say, just to get a lower cost. So, there's plenty of, whether it's restaurants or other, packaged goods, but, that are using they might be telling you they're using olive oil, but it's really an olive oil blend. And then, also olive oil kind of can, like anything else, has different levels of processing. Generally, olive oil, particularly extra virgin olive oil, is less processed than some of the seed oils that are used. But, to really try to get the highest quality that we can, I'm looking for a couple things. One is that, we say single origin, which means all of the olives come from the same place. Because sometimes you might look and it's, extra virgin olive oil, but it's blended from olives from, they might list 6 or 7 different countries. So, the amount of transportation and processing it's going to take to blend olives from 7 different countries is a lot different than if they're all coming from the same place.
Yeah.
And then, also looking at the packaging. So, I know there's a whole separate conversation around microplastics. It's basically impossible to completely avoid plastic exposure, but, we really try to be cognizant about minimizing our plastic exposure in our supply chain as much as possible. So since olive oil is such a key ingredient for us, we're actually using one that comes only in like a metal tin container, and really trying to avoid, plastic in the olive oil supply chain.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to ask about microplastics as well, because I think a lot of people are like talking about that more so now. And I'm very guilty of I look at my fridge, I feel like everything is plastic. Like I have Greek yogurt every morning and I have like the individual plastic containers for each one. Is that something, well, one, how do you reduce exposure to microplastics with matter? And then is that something that continues into your home, that you think about it all there?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it started in my home,
Okay,
well before matter. I think water is a big place. Kind of high level, when plastic containers become an issue, it's really when the product inside is heated and at a higher temperature. So the higher the temperature, the more likely that you're going to get plastic kind of leaching off the container into what you're eating. But you might look at a thing like a water bottle and say, oh, it's just a water bottle. We keep it. It's never hot, But as somebody who's been to a lot of these food distribution warehouses, there's plenty of times where, they have pallets of water bottles or plastic bottles of soda that are sitting on a pallet for months, if not years. And, they're left on a curb in 90-degree heat, overnight. So, you kind of have no idea where that thing has been before it gets to you. So that's where, anything that's heated, we definitely, make a, really avoid any kind of plastic exposure. And then, another big area, huge area actually, is cutting boards.
Okay.
You can just do the experiment. You get a plastic cutting board, because you're cutting into it, you're getting little kind of flakes of plastic that come off the board, every time you put a knife into it.
Wow. And that's such an easy replacement for someone at home. I know at a restaurant, it's can be more costly. But obviously y'all are very focused on that.
And you can only use certain woods because other woods are porous and kind of can absorb some of the food and grow bacteria. So I know we're using maple cutting boards for everything that we do. And
okay, wow.
I try to do that at home as well. At some point, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, basically just went through my kitchen and just tossed a whole bunch of had plastic spatulas and all these plastic tongs and all these things, and it's let's just get rid of them, get metal in. It's kind of a one-time makeover for my kitchen.
That's a good idea. That's something I'm procrastinating. I still use my plastic spatulas, and every time I cook with it, I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I should change that.
Yeah, look, it's so hard to know how much of this is impactful, right? And I don't want to be dogmatic around any little bit of plastic is going to be toxic or detrimental.
Yeah.
But it can't be good. And there's all these new studies coming out. There's some study in Italy where they were looking at hundreds of people, and they did biopsies on the plaque that was in their heart, and there's a huge percentage of them had actual significant amounts of microplastics in the plaque in their heart. And I feel I've heard other things similarly, these plastics that we're consuming are definitely getting into places into our body that they shouldn't be. So I think you're never going to be able to fully cut them out of our lives, unfortunately. But I think taking intentional steps to try to minimize your exposure, there's no downside in doing that.
Yeah, totally. And it could have an exponential effect, or it doesn't, but maybe you just feel better about it and focus on what you can control with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious, now you're in the space, so I'm sure you're, talking with other people that are also forefronters in the space about this. But whenever you were, still working with fried chicken and kind of going through your own wellness journey, how did you learn about all of this? what did you do? Like if someone is listening and is curious to like take the next step in their health and wellness journey, like how did you start to learn all about this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's from a number of different places, but to be honest, it started with podcasts. I feel like we're now at a time where there's just so much information available to all of us, like at our fingertips in a way that it didn't used to be.
Yeah.
15 years ago, if you wanted to do research on a certain topic or a certain, health related topic, you'd have to go read the studies yourself. Maybe somebody published a summary of that, but, you're like looking at the studies yourself, which can be, very kind of like statistics heavy, time consuming. You wouldn't even know where to look or, necessarily how to read them. And so, I think with the kind of advent of podcasts and a lot of doctors and experts, sharing kind of a lot of the science-backed information, just makes it that much more accessible. And then, and I try not to just like believe everything that I hear. That
I was going to
read.
ask about that too. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, but it's like, okay, like at some point, like when do you like fact check or
totally.
Yeah.
And look, this is just kind of my own approach and method.
Yeah.
And everyone can kind of take their own.
Yeah.
By no means should you just believe everything you hear, because frankly, on every different topic, there's people arguing on both sides of it, right? Like seed oils is like one of them, really popular ones right now, where you have kind of lots of people in the kind of health and wellness space advocating on both sides of the argument.
Right. Yeah.
And so, my approach is really, as you listen to and read content from a lot of different people, first off, you kind of have to make some decisions on your own on who do you think is more trustworthy and who seems less trustworthy. So I think, where it's coming from is important. And I think part of that is, are they basing what they're saying in science? Are there actual studies that support this? And, and some of it is gut feel. And then, also like, I try to like triangulate amongst multiple people. So if a few people that I trust are all saying the same thing on a topic, then, that kind of gives me the confidence to say, okay, I think based off of what we know today, I feel pretty good that that this is the right approach.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think if people are disagreeing and maybe there's, interesting points on both sides, and, I kind of reserve the right to try to get more information and continue to like listen to the narrative before, kind of taking my own stance.
Totally. Yeah.
And, I think another piece is, even for the people that you do trust, like science changes, opinions change, people change their opinions. So, there isn't one guru who knows everything. And so, you kind of have to use your own brain and make, logical decisions for yourself on what matters and what matters for you. So, for even the person who seems to be kind of the most trustworthy or the biggest name in the space, doesn't mean that you have to take everything that they say at face value.
Exactly. It's also everybody is different. So if someone's, obviously like this is a very elementary example, but if a big like person in the wellness space is sharing their like daily diet and meals, obviously if they're eating gluten, like I don't follow that because I like know that I have to be gluten-free. That's obviously like a very basic example, but even differences between like genders and, like hormonal needs, like everything is so different depending on each individual. And like, I think it's just important to like take in all that research, but also just like listen to yourself and like learn what's good for you, like specifically.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. Like that is the most critical, which is the reason why there necessarily isn't, the exact truth on any different health topic, is that it's really how your body responds to it. And so even if you're reading scientific studies, they might be they might be following hundreds or thousands of people, and they might even get enough of a signal to say there's statistical significance that this ingredient or this protocol does this thing, but that doesn't mean it did it for everybody, right? And so you 100% have to listen to your body. And I think that just whether it's diet or nutrition or, exercise, any of it, it has to work for you. And everybody has different needs, and, their body processes things differently. I know like kind of gut health and digestion is a huge piece of, I think, the kind of overall health of someone. And like, obviously, if you're celiac, any sort of gluten is going to do, horrible things to your gut. But everybody's gut digests things differently. And so, some people might really thrive on certain types of diets while other people it doesn't work for them. And so it's really about, trying different things and listening to your body. And, to the extent you can, trying to, you know, take a measured approach to, you know, the types of things that will help you thrive. You know, it's not to say that you have to kind of go crazy with it, but, you know, the more kind of data you can have, I think, the better, right? Of knowing, okay, when I eat these kind of things, here's how I feel. You know, I don't feel so great, but if I eat those kind of things, I feel better. And so, you know, over time, you can kind of start to paint a picture about the types of foods and the types of kind of diet approaches that work best for you.
Yeah, totally. And I'm curious, like, how do you balance all of that with, I mean, I'm sure you have a very busy lifestyle, owning a company with your family, your kids are younger. Like, how do you balance that with, you know, like not going crazy about it and like still like being disciplined and feeling good, but still, you know, just like living and having fun?
Yeah, look, it's hard. It's definitely hard. You know, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like I have in my mind, you know, you're not going to have, not every meal is going to be perfect, right? And I think I mentioned like, pizza is delicious. I know I'm not going to feel great if I have a lot of it, but, you know, every now and then it's like just have a slice of pizza from my favorite place because, you know, why not? It's delicious. But, you know, understanding that there's, you know, you have to have the mindset of kind of knowing where the line is. And that's different for everybody. But, you know, for me, again, there's areas where you know, as long as it's not frequent, I think it's okay to, you know, maybe deviate from your ideal kind of diet every day. But then there should be lines, you know, that you don't cross. And if you kind of have that in your mind, then it's not a hard decision, right? And whether that's a specific ingredient or a specific meal or even just, you know, it's really about like quantity over, you know, the thing. Like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll go out and have, you know, a slice of pizza today, but I'm not going to let that turn into, okay, now I'm going to have it tomorrow and the next day.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and
totally.
And just, you know, understand, having that discipline to know, you know, the types of things that I put into my body today are going to impact how I feel later today, tomorrow, the next day. And,
right. Yeah.
You know, once you have that kind of strong connection in your mind, some of those things just become less appealing. It's crazy how, you know, when I was younger, like the kind of things that my body craved. And once you stop giving it to your body, then, you know, the things that I used to love that were like super indulgent or super sweet, like I'm not even, you know, I don't crave them. And even like a bite and it's like, I'm a little bit off put. Just, you know, I don't know if that's because I'm kind of trained my body to not need that level of sweetness or because I've already kind of made that like mind body connection of, okay, if I eat a lot of this, I'm going to feel like crap afterwards. So it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. At least I've noticed both on my end. Like I used to have ice cream every single night. And like if I didn't have it, I'd be like, where's my sweet treat? And now it's like I'm just so used to not having ice cream every night that I just don't crave it anymore. And then like same with the taste of things. Like I used to love like a very sweet like latte from Starbucks with like all the syrups and stuff. And now like the thought of having that just like sounds like a little repulsive to me because I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Like I'm not used to like all of those flavors. So
yeah. I mean, it is amazing how quickly your body can adapt. You know, like I did maybe for 2 years, a couple of years back, I kind of did some, you know, intermittent fasting, you know, where I was, you know, nothing crazy, but I did the kind of like 16-8, you know, would eat between like noon and 8 p.m. And, you know, before I started it, I was always like a big breakfast guy. I would wake up super hungry every day. And, you know, when I tried it, like the first like week or two was tough because I'd be hungry and I'd have to kind of fight that. Then like I'd say within 2 weeks, I like would wake up, I wasn't even hungry. You know, your body just gets used to it.
Totally. That's so interesting. I feel like I had the opposite experience where I like didn't eat breakfast. And then I met with a dietitian and she was like, you need to start like eating breakfast. Like you work out in the mornings, like it's good to like have your breakfast. And I was like, okay, but I'm like not hungry. And now I'm like in the routine of having breakfast for the past year. And like I wake up and like my body knows that like I need to eat, like I'm hungry. But before I wasn't. So it is interesting how your body just adapts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really powerful message in there that, you know, like whatever kind of cycle or lifestyle you're in, you're only like a few weeks away from your body adapting to a different lifestyle.
Totally. Yeah. I'm curious because I feel like I've seen a lot about this on the internet, creatine. And I saw that Matter, you guys like recently posted something about creatine. And I'm just curious, like, is that something that y'all like use at all at Matter, or is that something that you are thinking about? And like, how would you describe it to someone that doesn't really understand what it is?
Yeah. So, it's something that kind of I've used kind of on and off in my life for a long time. It
Okay.
used to be taboo. Honestly, like I was an athlete in high school, and,
Okay.
I used creatine in high school, and I had to like hide it from my parents because there's a lot of like stigma and taboo and around it.
Interesting.
And they didn't
Okay.
support it.
Okay.
And then, of course, now it's like, I'd say there's
Everywhere.
overwhelming amount of science behind it that says it's safe, I think, for most people, and, has a lot of really, really great benefits. I think part of the reason of it being taboo back then is why there was so much study, so much science and studies around it, that we have all this data, which is great. But yeah, I mean, look, I think it's beneficial for kind of strength and training and muscle building and kind of lean, helps kind of overall building lean mass and body composition. And then, more recently, it seems like there's a lot of data coming out around the cognitive benefits as well. Like it can really help support kind of brain energy and kind of cognition. So, I think it's, there's a ton of data behind it. So, we think it's a really beneficial ingredient that can help a lot of people. Again, both on kind of like performance, lean body mass, and cognition and brain health. And, I'd say there is some, I know there's potentially some risks around, kidney. I know like, your kidneys process it. And so, if you have kidney issues, you might want to either talk to a doctor or at least, get some blood work done and understand, are these, is creatine supplementation doing anything with my kidneys? But, my general sense is that's pretty rare. And so, again, it seems like it's really beneficial for a lot of people. And so, it's a product that we offer in a number of different ways on our menu.
Okay.
But again, every single dish on our menu is customizable. So if you
yeah.
don't want it, you certainly don't have to get it in anything. But, we wanted to make it available, whether it's in smoothies or, some other beverages. Because again, we think it has a lot of benefits for a lot of people.
Yeah, totally.
And is generally, has a lot of data behind its safety.
Okay, awesome. So I want to go back to Matter. You guys have the location in New York in NoHo. Such a great location, by the way. It's such a fun area.
Yeah, I've lived down there for many years, and I love that area. It's like one of my favorite parts of New York. So, I was excited when we first started looking for sites for Matter. NoHo was kind of the top neighborhood I wanted to be in. Okay, cool.
So that location opened in November, correct?
We opened in December, actually.
December. Okay. I'm like trying to think back of when I went. Okay. Wow. So recently, how has it been going so far? What's the feedback like from Manhattan?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's been incredible.
Yeah.
The response that we've gotten from consumers has been pretty off the charts. We've really kind of struck a nerve with, a lot of people around this offering. I think we hear so many people will come in and just tell us, they've been waiting for something like this for so long. I've had plenty of people come in and say, oh, I had the idea for this. This is, I've been talking about this for years, which I take as a compliment.
Yeah, totally.
And, I think people want transparency above all else, and they want control over what they're putting into their body and what they're getting from a restaurant. And I think those are two things that are just really hard to get from a lot of places. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, people are busy. It's hard no one has the time to cook every single meal and, micromanage every single ingredient in every dish that they're making. And so,
right.
There's clearly a big demand for the convenience layer, but also there's a big demand for kind of the health aspects of eating a clean diet and eating it in kind of the quantities that your body needs. So, what's been interesting, we've gotten such a great response, but it's been really for a lot of different reasons, right? I think there's people, and we've had a lot of celiacs come in who are just so excited because, the entire restaurant is gluten-free, and there's a lot of dishes, that just are hard to get gluten-free at other places, and just kind of being able to go somewhere and know that you can trust everything on the menu. You don't have to worry about cross-contamination or anything like that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's certainly a lot of people who, even if they're not calorie counting, I feel like it's more common people, protein is really big right now. And so, a lot of people who kind of have a mindset of trying to hit a certain protein target for a meal or for a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we just give you the control to do that, right? Whether, you have a number in mind or you're just trying to make sure you get enough, there's certainly a lot of people kind of protein seeking in various meals. And so we give you just the ability to do that really easily.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a lot of people out there just who want clean ingredients, who just want to feel like they're going somewhere healthy, who can get something that's still delicious. Again, I take a lot of pride in the menu we put together because I think for every dish, I try to look at it out of the lens of, okay, we have to use the best ingredients. We have to make sure that it is the right kind of composition between, macros, being mindful of not adding too many carbs or not adding too much fat, if you don't need to, but also having it taste really good because, we could kind of design the optimal health meal plan for someone, but if it doesn't taste good, no one's going to come back. So, that's just kind of human nature. So, it has to be all of those things. And, thankfully, I'm a big believer and I think we're showing it. You can make really healthy food that also is delicious. Those things don't have to be at odds.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And I don't know if you can share, but you have this location in NoHo. Where do you see the future of Matter going? Do you want to open up more locations? Do you see it focusing on New York City, or would you ever want to expand across the nation?
Yeah, look, based off of the response, it seemed the early signal is that there's a lot of people out there who want something like this. And so, we are certainly making plans to try to reach more people beyond just the NoHo location. So, we're looking to expand kind of within the New York City market. And then there's also other markets across the country where I think, would be kind of the next logical place to go to, where I think there's just a high concentration of people who are, really focused on their own kind of health and wellness. Again, I think the kind of the backdrop of all this is there's just, there's a movement. It's kind of in the zeitgeist that more and more people are kind of taking their health into their own hands, right? They're thinking about what they're putting into their body, how they're moving their body, all of these other things that affect their health. And, I think people want to take a data-driven approach to that. And I think, again, we have data on everything. I think, whether it's in businesses or in, your personal life, more and more people, want to make data-driven decisions. And I think we've seen a big adoption around wearables and sleep trackers and activity trackers and, blood, tracking your blood work and your glucose levels, all of these things.
Yeah.
And, food and what you're putting into your body is probably the hardest thing to track. So, we're trying to kind of build this platform to make that easier. And again, I think so far it seems like it's really resonating strongly with a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And so, I think we want to kind of take this platform and reach as many people as we can.
Yeah. And can you tell us more about the platform itself in terms of tracking? Because I think we talked about the features of where you can customize your meals, but how can you track that over time in the platform?
Yeah. So right now, everything that you order through our restaurant automatically gets tracked in our mobile app. So you can see everything that you've consumed, that you've eaten with us. And we also have an integration to, a large food database. So you can track and log anything external as well, whether it's scanning a barcode or, similar to a MyFitnessPal where people are kind of manually logging everything they eat. You can manually log anything outside of the restaurant, but anything you get with us, we'll do that for you. So we're kind of making that whole piece a lot easier. And, what we're working on right now is really a platform to understand as much as we can about each person's kind of nutritional needs, right? So I think we, kind of as much, we're working on kind of bringing in some of these wearable device data. So whether it's sleep or activity or, again, understanding your blood work or anything like that, to really, have a model that can understand what are the kind of nutrients that somebody needs to thrive, especially, if they have a specific health goal in mind, and then, to really curate a kind of meal plan around kind of the individual's needs, nutritional needs.
Yeah.
And then I think the hardest part of that is actually making all of the items to be able to hit those targets in a meal plan.
Right.
Because it's one thing, you can go to a nutritionist and they can tell you, here's how many calories and macros you should be eating, and maybe here's some micronutrients you should be prioritizing. But then it's on you to go figure out how to make all those dishes. Yeah. It's a lot of work. So, we're really trying to build this experience, end to end where we can learn about you, help you design kind of an optimal meal plan, and then actually make all of those items for you, allow each kind of user to make those healthy decisions and really try to achieve whatever their health goals are, but just in a way that's not overly burdensome like it is right now.
Totally, yeah. And do you think this like level of personalization, because customization has always been a big thing, I think, in the food space, especially in the last like decade. Like you go to like Chipotle or something and you like customize your bowl. But I feel like there's a big difference between like the personalization that you guys do versus the customization. Do you think that the general food space, I mean, I think that you guys seem to be like the first ones doing this. Do you think that this is like where the future of the fast casual food space is going, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's still very much early in this kind of personalized nutrition space, but I just generally take the approach of, having more information and data on what I'm putting into my body, I think is only a good thing, and as long as it's done in a way that isn't like so obtrusive to kind of my day-to-day life. And so, while it might not be for everyone, I mean, look, there's always going to be a place in the world for fast food and processed foods. I don't see a world where those things are totally gone, of course.
For sure,
But, I do think, just what we've been seeing in general in, over the last couple of years in the kind of consumer space, and then specifically with what we've been seeing as a response to kind of launching our concept, it's hard not to say that I think the world is moving in this direction of, again, really understanding what people are putting into their body, not just the ingredients, but, how much of each ingredient and kind of the nutritional information of what they're putting into their body.
Totally. Cool. Okay. Well, this was such an interesting convo. It's so interesting hearing like your background and your wellness journey, and then your wife that has celiac and how it's just led to Matter. And I'm so excited to see like where it goes from here. I'm excited to still be a customer at the NoHo location.
Yeah.
Catch me there all the time. I have some rapid fire questions to end this off with.
Let's go.
Okay. What's one misconception about healthy eating that you wish more people understood?
I touched on it before, but
yeah,
eating healthy doesn't mean that your food has to taste bad or boring. You can have exciting and delicious and craveable dishes that are also healthy and with the right ingredients that will, fuel your body in a good way.
And gluten-free. The gluten-free doesn't mean bad either.
And gluten-free doesn't mean bad. Look, I've eaten every single gluten-free thing under the sun.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good gluten-free stuff out there. It doesn't mean it's all good, and some categories are, further behind than others, but there's a lot of great gluten-free stuff. I mean, the amount of times where either I've made a gluten-free dish or we've gone to a restaurant, that serves gluten-free pasta or things like that, where, I'll be with friends who don't have this kind of celiac person in their life, and they're like, can't believe, oh my God, this is gluten-free. Like, I would have never known. So, hear that a lot. And I think the gluten-free options are only getting better. Yeah,
totally. All right. Looking back, what's the hardest lesson that you've learned so far as a founder building Matter?
The hardest lesson? Well, it's early.
Yeah.
I think you have to really have conviction in what you're doing. And while you can't be everything to everybody. I think if you kind of build something with, really, principled approach in mind, that ultimately good things will come. And so, I think that, we've certainly, as we were, whether it's building the menu or just the concept in general, there was a lot of kind of back and forth and really you're trying to anticipate what people want. And what's going to resonate, and to some extent you just have to put something out there and then get their reaction, and be ready to kind of adapt quickly. But the big kind of thesis and theme is just this approach is something that people want, and we made a big investment up front before getting a single customer response, and so it just it certainly took conviction to get to this point that this approach is something that was going to resonate, because again, no one is really doing this in the restaurant space or really, in the meal plan space or anything. So, I think any time where there's a pretty dramatic kind of change from what people are used to, that can go a lot of different ways. So, I think, we had a lot of conviction behind this, and, the early response has been really great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, last question. Where can people find Matter? Where can they keep up with Matter?
Yeah, so, we'd love to have people come and check out our kind of flagship restaurant in NoHo. It's on Crosby Street, just south of Bleecker. We're also available for delivery kind of within all of Lower Manhattan, basically delivering from, Financial District up to 34th Street. And that is through our mobile app, which you can find in the App Store under Matter Formula. And you can check us out on Instagram and TikTok under Matter Formula, for updates. I mean, we're kind of releasing new products and new features, pretty frequently. So, definitely, would be great to have people follow along for the journey.
Yeah. Is there a sneak peek you can give us? Anything exciting coming up, or can you not share?
Yeah. I mean, look, we have a number of different things in the works.
Okay.
We're like, I think, we felt really good about the initial menu that we put out. And I think one of the next kind of steps in our, a kind of combination of the digital product, but also the nutritional products in the store is really trying to, curate dishes and kind of meal plans around a specific goal. So, we're working on kind of these functional goals. So, whether it's brain health or gut health or these types of things, we're really kind of curating some plans to try to, improve those aspects of, whatever you're looking for. So working on that now and excited to have those launch soon.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I will be on the lookout.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was such a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to rate the show, follow, and share this with a friend. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Celiac Diaries podcast. I hope you're leaving with a tip, a story, or just a little inspiration to live your best life with celiac. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, or leave a review. Stay well.